it's not unreasonable to want peace in Ukraine. We all want peace. The war that Russia launched in 2014 and expanded in 2022 has been catastrophic, not only for Ukraine, but also for Russia itself and for the rest of the world. It's put us in a precarious, alarming situation. So it's right that if you can find common ground between the two sides, negotiation and a diplomatic track all make sense. But from what I can understand of Mr. Farage's comments, he seems to have said Ukraine can't win this war, so they should seek a settlement. Now, interestingly, that's exactly what Moscow says. Moscow says Ukraine can't win this war and should seek a settlement. The question is, what kind of settlement might that look like? Because what Moscow is demanding as a settlement looks to any disinterested observer like Russia winning the war. I mean, at the moment, Russia has around 20% of Ukraine's territory, an area roughly the size of England. Russia would be delighted to stop the fighting now and hold on to that territory. That would be a great victory for Russia. Although actually Russia has demanded that Ukraine give up more territory, another 2.5% of the country, to a total of 136,000 square kilometers, vast area of Ukraine. That's not a peace treaty, that's surrender by Ukraine. And that seems to be what Mr. Farage is advocating.
Well, he's not really advocating anything of the sort. He's just saying that there should be a peace agreement. He's not saying exactly what form that peace agreement should take. He's simply saying that it should be there should be a basis for negotiation. Let me ask you this. Do you think it's practical that Vladimir Zelenskyy has been constantly talking about taking all Ukrainian territory back, including Crimea, which was taken by Russia in 2014, and the West is supporting that particular line? I mean, do you think that that is actually a sensible policy and pursuit that he's going for?
It's entirely a sensible goal, Ali, because that is what international law states. In 1991, Russia signed a treaty called the Bielovesh Accord, which recognized Ukraine within its present international boundaries, including Crimea, by the way. In 1997, Russia and Ukraine signed another treaty, the so-called Big Treaty between Ukraine and Russia, which again recognized the whole of Ukraine within its boundaries, including Crimea. Now, 17 years later, Russia invaded Crimea and also invaded eastern Ukraine, and then was fought to a standstill. 8 years later, they invaded again. So if you think that reaching an agreement that Russia should be allowed to keep some of that land would create stability, that's completely wrong. It would simply lead to Russia attacking again a few years later. Secondly, there's this important principle that countries can't just invade their neighbors and grab their land and annex it into their own territory. No country has been allowed to do that since 1945. And if we, the United Kingdom, or any other country, accepts Russia taking 1 square inch of Ukrainian territory illegally and incorporating it into Russia, we are tearing up the whole post-1945 settlement. We're opening a Pandora's box of conflicts. Vladimir Putin has gone back to the 9th century to justify his attack on Ukraine. If we go back that far, we might as well have France claiming the southeast of England or us claiming half of France.
But you talk about a Pandora's box, and you're a former British ambassador. I mean, what does success actually look like? What does a political settlement look like? Because we all know that in most cases, war at some point will lead to a decision and a discussion and a settlement being done on a negotiating table. If you are saying it's a Pandora's box, what does success actually look like at the moment? Because Putin's into this up to his neck. He's spent hundreds of thousands of lives have already been cost on this. He really has nowhere to go. He's in for the long haul here. Well, what can the Ukrainians do apart from the fact that they are using lots of young men, aren't they? I mean, so at some point there is going to be a peace negotiation, isn't there? I mean, that's what's going to happen.
We absolutely all want to have a peace negotiation, and nobody is against starting peace negotiations at any time. But up to now, Russia has been setting completely impossible conditions for any kind of settlement, which look like surrender. you're quite right that there is no easy landing zone at the moment. If Russia were to withdraw to its pre-February 2022 boundaries, where it was already occupying around 7% of Ukraine, then that would look like a defeat for Vladimir Putin. This war is all about Vladimir Putin. It's about him being terrified that democracy could come from Ukraine into Russia.
Let me ask you.
He can't do that.
Okay.
And Vladimir Zelenskyy, he can't say, well, okay, we're not winning this war. It's terrible for our country. Let's just give Russia 20% of our country. He can't do that either. So the most likely thing, unfortunately, is that the war will continue, this grinding war of attrition. And it's in our interests that Ukraine doesn't lose that war.
But you see, I understand the point you're making about losing the war, but many, many people are losing their lives. Young men as well are now going to have to be conscripted in Ukraine. There are no easy solutions here at all. And at some point, I mean, the West has to be relied upon to keep funding Zelenskyy with arms, and not only money, but actually arms. It has not put its economies on a war footing, really, has it? And the Russians have.
That is absolutely true. The West has not put its economy on a war footing. We're living our lives pretty much normally, and we're giving Ukraine a little bit of help. I remember having a discussion with Boris Johnson, no less, in the British Embassy in Vienna back in 2016, when Russia had already invaded Ukraine at that point. And I said, look, the only way that we're going to stop Russia from invading Ukraine again is to arm them to the teeth. And at that point, the consensus in most Western countries was that that might provoke Russia. So Ukraine got night vision goggles and field hospitals and defensive stuff. The result was that Russia saw that Ukraine was weak and attacked. And I'm afraid that there's no solution for the West that doesn't involve continuing to support Ukraine. If Russia ends up, even with just the amount of Ukraine it's got now, we are going to be looking at defense expenditure that's 5-10 times higher than we're paying now for the rest of your and my lives.
Thank you very much indeed. That was Leigh Turner, former UK ambassador to Ukraine and author of the upcoming book, Lessons in Diplomacy, Politics, Power and Parties. I look forward to reading that book. Sounds very interesting. I think Leigh Turner was quite balanced. I think he was hinting towards the end there that there will have to be a negotiation of some kind. But his argument was, as I understood it, that what is being proposed by the Russians at the moment, with 20% of the territory, at least, of Ukraine, is not a basis for serious negotiation. It was not clear to me from what he was saying that no ceding of any land whatsoever is a basis for negotiation. You see, I think that the tragedy of this situation is that Nigel Farage is saying a peace agreement should be something that Vladimir Zelenskyy should countenance. Otherwise, there will be no young men left in Ukraine. And I think it's a serious point.